Have you ever spent months lovingly cultivating your own food, only to be publicly humiliated by neighbors who think tomatoes and lettuce lower property values? Well, that happened to me, and what they didn't know was that I had just been elected city mayor, something they would discover in the worst possible way. My name is Elena Rodriguez. I'm 42 years old, a retired agricultural engineer, and this is the story of how a simple home garden turned into the biggest political plot twist a homeowners association has ever witnessed. When I moved to the exclusive Sunset Hills community. 2 years ago, my only desire was to have a small piece of land to grow my own organic vegetables. After decades working with sustainable agriculture, nothing gave me more pleasure than watching seeds transform into fresh, nutritious food. What I didn't expect was that this innocent passion would trigger an ego war that would change not only my life, but the destiny of an entire community. The passion that became a nightmare. Everything started absolutely normally. In my 400 square meter backyard, I dedicated a 150-meter area to create an exemplary organic garden. Perfectly organized rows of tomatoes, cucumbers, lettuce, carrots, aromatic herbs, and even a small greenhouse for seedlings. Each plant was carefully positioned, the drip irrigation system worked like a Swiss watch, and the edges were bordered by decorative stones I had personally selected. Curious neighbors frequently stopped to admire my work. Children were fascinated watching how tomatoes changed color, and I loved explaining the process of photosynthesis and plant growth. I even distributed produce from my garden to those who showed genuine interest. It was my small contribution to a healthier and more sustainable community. But the tranquility lasted only 8 months. It was on a Thursday morning that I found an official HOA envelope in my mailbox. The document, signed by President Vivian Blackwell, was a formal notification of severe aesthetic violation, giving me 15 days to completely remove all non-ornamental structures and vegetation from the property. The escalation of absurdity. My first reaction was complete disbelief. Aesthetic violation? My garden was more organized and beautiful than many ornamental gardens in the neighborhood. I immediately scheduled a meeting with Vivian to clarify what clearly seemed to be a misunderstanding. Vivian Blackwell was the type of person you immediately identify as someone accustomed to commanding and being obeyed. A woman about 50 years old, impeccable platinum hair, perfectly manicured nails, and an attitude that mixed arrogance with poorly disguised disdain. When I arrived at the HOA headquarters, she received me with a fake and condescending smile. "Elena, dear," she said, not even bothering to offer me a chair. "I understand you come from a more rustic environment, but here at Sunset Hills we have standards of excellence that need to be maintained." I explained that my garden followed all the spacing, height, and organization regulations stipulated in the community manual. I showed photos of the impeccable organization, professional irrigation systems, and even the organic agriculture certificates I possessed. "The problem isn't technical," Vivian interrupted with an even more condescending tone. "It's a matter of class and sophistication. Our residents pay premium prices to live in an elegant and refined environment. Gardens are appropriate for farms or working-class neighborhoods, not for a high-end community like ours." The public humiliation. What happened next was something I'll never forget. Vivian had called an extraordinary assembly to discuss aesthetic issues affecting property valorization. When I arrived at the community event hall that Friday night, I found more than 60 residents waiting. Vivian began the presentation with slides comparing different types of landscaping. She showed French, English, contemporary gardens, all impeccably ornamental. Then, on the giant screen, appeared a photo of my garden with the title, "Example of What Should Not Be Done." The humiliation was systematic and cruel. Vivian described my garden as inadequate for the community's socioeconomic standard, visually, polluting, and harmful to property valorization. Some residents began murmuring in agreement. Others seemed uncomfortable with the presentation's tone. "We need to be clear," Vivian declared, looking directly at me. "This community is no place for Grandpa's farm games. Those who cannot adapt to our standards of excellence should consider looking for a place more appropriate to their lifestyle." I felt my blood boil, but maintained composure. After all, I had information that would soon transform that public humiliation into the biggest surprise of that arrogant woman's life. The secret that would change everything. What Vivian and that entire audience didn't know was that 3 weeks before that humiliating assembly, I had been officially elected mayor of our city in a historic supplementary election. The position had become vacant after the previous mayor resigned due to corruption scandals, and my independent candidacy, focused on urban sustainability and local agriculture, had surprised all political analysts. During my campaign, I deliberately kept a low profile in the community. I wanted my neighbors to know me as a person before learning about my new public function. Apparently, this strategic secrecy was about to yield unexpected dividends. The official inauguration would be the Monday following the assembly, and I had asked the press office to maintain absolute secrecy until the ceremony. But that night's events made me rethink the entire revelation strategy. When Vivian finished her humiliating presentation and opened for questions, I calmly raised my hand. "Vivian," I said with a serene voice, "before we make any definitive decisions about landscaping, how about we discuss the new municipal policies incentivizing urban agriculture that will take effect next week?" She looked at me with disdain. "Elena, we're not here to discuss your environmental fantasies. We're talking about real aesthetic standards." "Interesting," I replied, maintaining a calm tone, "because these environmental fantasies include tax exemptions for properties with certified gardens, fines for associations that prohibit domestic agriculture, and even municipal subsidies for residential composting systems." The devastating plot twist. The silence in the hall was absolute. Vivian frowned, clearly irritated by what she perceived as my attempt to divert focus from the discussion. "And who exactly approved these fantastical policies?" she asked sarcastically. That's when I smiled for the first time that night. "I approved them, Vivian, in my capacity as elected mayor of this city." The impact of the revelation was like an atomic bomb detonating in slow motion. First, deadly silence. Then, confused murmurs. Next, a cacophony of voices trying to process the information. "This is ridiculous," exclaimed Vivian, but her voice was already trembling slightly. "If you were mayor, that would be public information." I took out my phone and showed her the front page of the local newspaper that would be published the next morning. My photo was featured with the headline, "Elena Rodriguez, the new mayor who promises to revolutionize urban agriculture." The information becomes officially public at my inauguration, Monday at 10 a.m., I explained calmly. "But since you made this issue so public, I thought it appropriate to clarify some misunderstandings." The complete power reversal. The transformation in the hall's atmosphere was immediate and dramatic. Residents who minutes before agreed with Vivian about the inadequacy of my garden now looked at me with a mixture of respect, curiosity, and a little healthy fear. After all, they had just discovered they had elected a neighbor to the city's most powerful position. Vivian, meanwhile, was visibly shaken. All her arrogance and condescension had evaporated, replaced by an expression of poorly disguised panic. "Of course, if you're really the mayor," she stammered, "maybe we could reconsider some aspects of our landscaping policy." "Oh, Vivian," I replied with a genuine smile, "don't worry. My position as mayor doesn't change anything regarding community regulations. You continue having complete autonomy to decide internal matters." The relief on her face lasted exactly 3 seconds. "However," I continued, As I mentioned, the new municipal policies include some interesting changes. For example, homeowners associations that prohibit sustainable domestic agriculture will automatically lose all municipal tax benefits. This means you can no longer deduct administration fees from municipal taxes. The mathematics of reality. I explained in detail how the new municipal rules would work. Communities that encouraged sustainable practices, including certified home gardens, would receive significant property tax discounts. Those that prohibited them would face not only loss of benefits, but also fines for discouraging environmentally responsible practices. Let's do a quick calculation, I said, taking out a calculator. Sunset Hills has 84 residential units. With current benefits, you save approximately $180,000 annually in municipal taxes. Without these benefits and considering fines for anti-sustainable practices, you would pay about $340,000 more per year. The number caused a murmur of concern among those present. Vivian was visibly pale. "But this is blackmail," she protested. "No, Vivian," I replied calmly. "This is public policy aimed at the common good. You're free to maintain your aesthetic rules. You'll just bear the financial consequences of the association's choices." The irrefutable proposal. That's when I presented my final proposal, which would transform that entire situation into a victory for everyone. "I have a suggestion that will benefit our entire community," I announced. "How about we transform Sunset Hills into the first model sustainable urban agriculture community in the city? I commit to personally guide any resident interested in creating their own organic garden. We'll transform this place not just into an example of landscaping sophistication, but also into a model of sustainability and food self-sufficiency." The idea was received with growing enthusiasm. Residents began asking questions about composting, irrigation systems, and even about the possibility of creating a community garden in the common area. Vivian attempted one last resistance. "But what about the aesthetic issue and property valorization?" "Vivian," I replied patiently, "properties with environmental sustainability certification have 23% higher valorization than market average. Additionally, City Hall will invest $500,000 in infrastructure improvements in communities that join the Urban Agriculture Pilot Program." The triumphant outcome. The vote was overwhelming. 67 votes in favor of my proposal, only 8 against. Vivian was one of the few dissenting voices, but even she didn't have the courage to openly oppose the new mayor. 3 months later, Sunset Hills had completely transformed. More than half the residents had some type of domestic cultivation. The common area housed a community garden that became a meeting point for entire families. Children learned about nutrition and sustainability playing in the soil. Vivian resigned from the HOA presidency 2 weeks after my mayoral inauguration. The new administration, much more collaborative and visionary, works in partnership with City Hall to implement increasingly ambitious projects. My small garden, once considered inadequate, is now visited by delegations from other cities interested in replicating our urban sustainability model. What began as persecution became pioneering. Conclusion and final lesson. Today, 2.5 years later, Sunset Hills is nationally recognized as a model sustainable community. Our resident satisfaction indices, property valorization, and quality of life are among the highest in the region. Most importantly, we created a community genuinely united around values of sustainability and mutual respect. The great lesson from this experience is clear. Never underestimate the people around you. That quiet neighbor who grows tomatoes might very well be the person who determines your entire city's future. Vivian learned this in the most humiliating way possible, but our entire community came out winning. For those watching, remember, knowledge, dignity, and future vision always triumph over arrogance and prejudice. If someone tries to diminish your dreams or disqualify your passions, stay firm. Sometimes the best response isn't a shout of revolt, but rather a silent smile and a revelation at the right moment. If you enjoyed this story of how a simple garden transformed into a sustainable revolution, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. We have many other inspiring stories of people who transformed challenges into incredible opportunities. Until the next video, and remember, plant seeds of change wherever you are.